Next up, we're going to talk basketball with head coach Darren Pitzner, fourth-year head coach over at Green Mountain High School in Jefferson County. And this will be a little bit different. We've had a lot of energy and communication regarding football, but there are the winter sports who are awaiting what is next. And that's where we're going with this conversation. Darren, happy to have you here. When you reached out to me and you wanted to discuss basketball and what your agenda is, what is your purpose? What are you trying to get done?
Yeah, Marty, good morning. Thanks for the chance to have a discussion, because we need to be doing a lot more talking really about the game plan for this season and flexibility and amending. And so what got me, I guess, interested in expanding this conversation is just conversations in the gym with parents, both at Green Mountain, and I coach with B&B Basketball Academy, so at the club, speaking all summer about the game plan, about the procedures, about the safety, about their concerns. And it became glaringly obvious that there's a major, major disconnect in this state, probably a lot of states, between our leadership, who's doing their best, and the parents, who we all work for. As coaches, administrators, as elected officials, we all work for the parents, and that's whose opinion really, really matters. And with that disconnect, no elected official got that job based on how they're going to handle a pandemic. And so nobody at CHSA, who's working really hard, they're doing a lot of good things, but they didn't get their jobs. They weren't appointed there based on how they're going to handle a pandemic. They don't know. And so people need to talk, and people aren't talking. So they're talking to me in the gym, they're talking to other coaches, and they're expressing this very deep frustration because the parents have assessed the risk for their kids, and no one loves their kids more than the parents do, and so they're frustrated. They don't feel like they're being represented. And so the discussion needs to be deeper. There needs to be more polls and more surveys. And so ultimately, that's what I ended up doing. I said, let's survey, in my case, basketball families, but I think it's very representative of, there are 1.2 million kids in Colorado.
Now, let's understand, as we're having this conversation with head coach Darren Pitzner from Green Mountain, they just went to the Final Four last year in 2019, Sweet 16 appearance in 2018. When you talk about surveys, pushing the conversation, enhancing the discussion, what I was impressed with is, in a very professional way, in an intellectual way, which I think speaks to some of the decision makers, you developed a survey, disseminated it, and got a lot of response. Share with us what you were trying to get done with that survey, how you went about that process, and then we'll talk about what you learned.
Yeah, so it's a good response because people want a voice. So frustrated that they don't have a voice in this. And so 223 responses now, and that's representative of 25 different high schools. It was optional whether to put your name and the school that you're from, but for those who responded with their name and the school, there were 25 different schools, and that's in all corners of the state, all different leagues. And so I think it's pretty representative as a whole, and the results were really overwhelming. And I want to make sure that anybody who sees this understands I am not at all a COVID denier one bit, or anti-mask, that we shouldn't be protecting our neighbor at all. In fact, I've got very, very close friends who are in their 70s who are suffering from a pretty wicked case of COVID-19 right now, and they're hurting. They had a lot of comorbidities, and of course we know that the elderly and the sick need to be really, really careful. And so what the survey speaks to is, regarding the reduction in the season, how do you feel about that? Regarding the mask mandate that kids are playing, and it may be different during the season, but for kids who are playing club basketball or playing at the park, where you can't socially distance, so technically you need to have a mask on when you're playing. And how do you feel about that? And then also in November and December, when we're shut down, really it's about 2.5 months from mid-October through early January, where, and I don't know if this comes from the governor or from CHSA, but we have no sports. And so families, how are you going to fill that void? are you going to be socially distancing, or are you going to be playing club basketball? And those results, I think, were really telling.
And let's keep in mind, we got to keep track of that calendar. You're in Schedule B, basketball is, both women's and men's basketball. After fall sports that are currently competing ends, we're going to have a dark period of when I'm talking about events from October 17th to January 7th. And that's one of your concerns. So moving on from that, with your basketball community, what are a couple of the, I guess, impactful things that you're learning from that survey?
The comments were really passionate, saying, bring back sports. We've assessed the risk. Let our kids play. And so regarding the state's mask mandate, do you feel an amendment or exception should be made for kids who've been screened? So they've had temperature checks, they've done parent waivers, they've had health questions, they've acknowledged that no contact with anybody who's tested positive. So they've been screened, that they can play basketball and other sports without a mask. And what families said is 92.6% said yes, we should make an amendment for the mask while we're playing sports. That's just what the parents and the coaches said. 82% of the respondents were parents. So 7.4% said no. I mean, that's pretty overwhelming with any margin of error there.
Now, do you think that when you talk about this, your respondents were 220 something, right?
Right.
Okay, so if the data people go, and how does that sampling represent all of the basketball community in Colorado?
Yeah, with representing 25 different high schools, I don't know what the margin of error would be, but I think, a lot of people were excited to do the survey because they just have had no voice in this. So I think it's pretty representative that families, they've assessed the risk, and they know that if we offer sports, okay, if I have grandma or grandpa living at home, or if I have a sick sibling, then I need to opt out for my family. And parents, of course, they want to have the right to do that, obviously. But for everyone else, they've assessed the risk, and they know how hard these cuts have been. And I think it's part of the frustration is it's easy to sit in an administrative office or in the governor's office and say, well, hey, you still have a season, so be positive. And every time I email out updates to my family and say, hey, this is cut, but we have it. And it's always like, hey, everything we want is still in front of us. It's positive. It is. We still have a season. But it's not really about the 40% of games that's been cut. It's about the 80% of the season. These kids already lost April skill building and June team camps, and they lost a lot of July. And now, in Jeffco, we just closed down for another 3.5 weeks. We just opened up that we can start having open gyms next week. But they've lost a lot of their experience. And from the survey, it's very, very clear that in November and December, we're not reducing any risk, because the kids, 4.5% of the survey respondents said that their kids will be socially distanced. 4.5%. Everyone else is going to be playing club ball with their friends, club ball with their family, or with kids from different schools. But that is really, really expensive. It's tough I coach in a nice community, beautiful community, Green Mountain, where most of the families, they can pay a couple extra $100 to have, a more normal season of November and December. But in the city, and it's tough for the Green Mountain people. So the kids in poorer neighborhoods, that's awful. That's awful, because that's extremely expensive. And so they're going to be sitting at home just watching. I'm the youngest of 5. I would have been like, can you do this? $80, $100 here. How much of that adds up? I'd be like, well, no, I can't play. So it's January 4th for me.
With that survey, who are you trying to reach specifically? Because I think that's so important. Who are you getting after when you're trying to make your statements, make your claims?
I guess a two-step process. First of all, those conversations that I talked about in the gym, is that representative of the state? And so I want to get that information, the survey out there, to figure out, am I right that, there seems to be this major disconnect, that our leaders are operating under this. They think that if we shut things down, then that's the complete safety bubble that we should be living in. Whereas the parents are saying, no, first of all, it's not that simple that if we cut something, then the kids are sitting at home and they're quarantined and they're perfectly safe. No, they're doing some other activity, probably with more kids who haven't been screened. And then also by getting that information back and realizing, okay, yes, this is how parents feel. They want their kids in the gym. So now that we have that information, now it's getting it in front of CHASA. So I've sent it to CHASA. I copied the governor. I hope that they take a look at that. I hope they get that to the Department of Public Health and Environment, and that they really assess that versus with the mental health of kids and how important that is, because a lot of times the health department is making decisions based on, if I have this event, could that spread the virus? If yes, then I need to not have that event. Well, it's not that simple, because again, the kids are still 24 hours in a day, and they need to fill that time somehow. And so they're still spreading the virus. So if we can have more structure and more screening, then let's do that. Let's have more opportunities for high school sports. And so now that we have this information that says 85% of our families want to expand the season, they don't want a 6-week basketball season. They want to expand that, because let's November and December, the kids got to do something. So let's give them the structure. And that speaks for all, that's represented for all winter sports, because there's also hockey and there's swimming, and there's a lot of opportunities that we can be providing as public servants. We all work for our parents, and that's what they want. So we need to be representative of that. So the process, to answer your question, is to get that information in front of CHSAA. They do have it. I was emailed back by the commissioner there that said thanks for sending. So hopefully they're taking a look at it.
So you did get a response from somebody when you shared it?
Yeah, you bet.
Okay.
Nothing from the governor's office other than just the general email that they send to every email but hopefully that they're reviewing it. And it's representative of 1.2 million kids in this state. And that's a lot of parents, that's a lot of voters, and they overwhelmingly want us as coaches and leaders to provide more opportunities for kids, not less.
Are you still doing the survey, or is that project over? What you have?
It's open. There's still some more responses coming in.
Okay. Can people reach out to you, because you're very active on Twitter? So we have the direct message function. So if someone wanted to reach out to you and say, I'd like to answer those 4 or 5 questions, just so you
absolutely, yeah, I'll send it to anybody because the comments are some of the best information. And when I sent the survey, there were 72 comments when I sent it to CHSAA, and of those 73 comments, 69 were positive in favor of let's open things back up for kids. We understand the risk is very, very real. We get that, but as parents, we want the choice. We want to be able to opt in or opt out, not just have these blanket cancellations and closures and a 2.5-month dark period.
Now, one thing that I've kind of noticed is the indoor sports. They're up against it, right? It seems like there is definitely a feeling that indoor sports are going to be a problem with terms of what the perception is with transmitting the virus. What's your reaction to that when I say it out loud?
I think that there's a lot of risk in a lot of things that we do, and it's something that I don't have kids, so it's not. I just work for my parents, and so I'm just a coach who wants to provide the opportunities that my parents want, and they've assessed the risk for their families, and about 95% want to opt in. And so for me, I'm not a scientist, and I'm not going to present the science. I'm going to look at the science and respect the science, and the science does need to drive everything that we do, and we need to be masked up when we can. And when it comes to sports, it's something where we have so much more information now about this virus than we did. Of course, we had to close things down in March because we just didn't know. But now the parents know, and they've assessed that risk for their families. And so my job isn't to interpret the science or to make decisions based on that. My job is to provide the opportunities that my parents and the parents in Colorado want, and they want their kids in the gym.
And let me help you out a little bit with the focus. You can check me down if I'm wrong. You also have an issue with the January 4th practice start date. You would like that adjusted on your
Yeah, every coach in the state is saying, how are we going to start practice on the 4th and play on the 7th? Like, for example, I played Sand Creek on, I think it's the 9th. They were the number 1 seed in 4A last year. They are really, really good. They are a really good team. And so, of course, we need to be practicing in December. And CHSAA they allow, the unofficial, the optional practices. You have to do things under a club. So everyone's trying to jump through the hoops because everyone knows you got to practice in December if you're going to be at all ready to have a real season and have kids conditioned where they're actually safe and in shape, and they've done some lifting and their lungs are ready and they're ready to run. You can't just, so everyone knows that we'll be practicing in December, but it's under this facade of a club, or it's under, it's optional, but it's not really optional. And the coaches are just trying to maneuver through this. And 85% of the respondents to the survey said, let's be real. Let's start it in November, or let's start it in December. Let's expand the season, give us more freedom to start official practices, so that we're not trying to fool ourselves with, trying to get through different rules or whatever,
Yeah, and we also know what we're, when you're talking about the club thing, we know what we're dancing around too. Is it's forced the issue that, hey, look, basketball, the balls are bouncing somewhere. Okay, it's just not. No, your school name's not on the front of your jersey. That has nothing to do with it. Schools are out of the picture, but definitely they're shooting some hoops somewhere, right?
You bet.
Yeah, that's no question. Well, it's interesting to hear that. Again, impressive how you put together the survey. And we shared some of that to where people can get a visual of what that looks like. Again, look at the Twitter handle at the bottom of Darren. If you want to reach out to him via direct message and share what you would like to communicate on that short survey, please do that. And otherwise, we wish the best for all the basketball community. And then, of course, to your Green Mountain Rams, Darren. We appreciate it so much.
Thanks, Marty. And I want to thank all of our teachers who are working really hard. And I want to thank CHASA for continuing to be flexible and to review all of this, and thank the governor for continuing to keep fighting for families, and appreciate the conversation.